think you have a recent piece that argues AI is eating venture capital. If foundation models and AI infrastructure keep absorbing most of the dollars, what does that concentration mean for cyber founders trying to raise in 2026?
In cyber specifically, AI has been the greatest gift in a long time. So you are accurate in saying that the vast majority of the new capital that has gone into this business is going to some form of AI infrastructure or foundation model lab. Like, that part of the industry has consumed a ton of capital.
A lot of vendors are claiming agents can replace tier one analysts, things like that. From where you sit across the portfolio, what part of the agentic SOC story do you think is real versus maybe is oversold?
I think a lot of people know what it means to have driver assistance in their car, and I think Cloud Code is really a great driver assistant in the SOC.
What is actually separating the founders who finish, knowing that everyone can kind of build at this stage, and there's a lot of capital, and it is a noisy space?
AI is really only magical to the extent you have a magic power.
Thank you for joining the Resilient Cyber Show. My name is Chris Hughes, and today I'm joined by Jon Sakoda from Decibel. Jon, thanks for being on.
Thanks, Chris. Super excited to do this.
Yeah, you're someone I followed on LinkedIn for at least 2 or 3 years now at this point. I try to broaden my perspective, beyond just cyber practitioners in my echo chamber, and getting more interested in the world of venture and who's funding startups, where the capital is going, all these kind of things. But for folks that don't follow you already, don't know about you and the team, can you tell us a bit about yourself and the background of the team?
One, huge fan of the work that you do. I'm also a fan of your work on LinkedIn, and I'm a subscriber, so very much appreciate what you do. For those that I haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Jon Sakoda. I started my first company in cybersecurity in the early 2000s. So you may remember, before there was Facebook and Friends, we had instant messaging, AIM, MSN, ICQ. So we didn't have smartphones back then, so all of our social networking was done at work. And as you might imagine, that was a huge security vulnerability between corporate networks and the outside world. So my company was called IMlogic. I built an IM firewall. I stopped bad things from coming in, stopped good things from going out. My company was acquired by Symantec in the mid-2000s. So I'm a founder at heart. Love starting early stage tech companies. So my entire career, first at a firm called NEA, now at a firm called Decibel, has been committed to helping technical founders at the earliest stage, at pre-product market fit, so when it's super early, build technical products for technical buyers. My firm is now 7 years old, and we've invested in a lot of mutual friends and are excited to be a part of this community.
Yeah, definitely. You guys have some amazing companies in the portfolio, amazing founders and teams. It's funny you mentioned ICQ. I can still hear like the messaging sound that you would get, like a whistling type sound, if I remember.
No, totally.
Yeah.
And everyone also remembers their AIM screen name if they were that old.
Absolutely, so, absolutely. So, I wanted to start there actually with your background, knowing that you've built a company, sold it, got acquired, got into venture. Like, you spent over a decade at NEA, as I looked you up and kind of dug into your background more, with companies like Cloudflare, MongoDB, HackerOne, before founding Decibel. What convinced you to leave a big platform firm like that and start your own early stage, fund, essentially?
Chris, I know you have a military background, and a lot of people in cyber have a military background. So the analogy I often use is, the big funds are super powerful and they're very scaled. They oftentimes feel like the larger parts of the armed forces. So, for example, I like to say the big funds are like the Navy. Decibel is trying to be more like the Navy SEALs. So I think sometimes we want to do highly specialized work. We want to do that at an elite level. Maybe what we trade off with scale, we get speed. And I think that focus allows us, in particular at the early stage, to be quite effective. I think a lot of founders recognize that their advantage early on is speed, and that really comes from specialization. And so we want to be where they are on the field, trying to iterate and innovate as quickly as possible. And there are some advantages to being small when you're trying to move as fast as possible.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I know you have a strong portfolio of technical founders and like a background of believing in backing these technical founders. And you've built built the firm around founders helping founders. I know you all host like Rising Stars and Cyber Dinners and so on with like portfolio companies and security leaders. Like, what does a community model do for a cyber founder that maybe a traditional fund that we just talked about, maybe these larger kind of more structured bureaucratic firms don't do for innovative startup founders?
Yeah, going back to my analogy of maybe being the Navy SEALs or the more specialized group, our job is to be in the frontier. So together, whether you're a founder or in my case, like somebody that wants to work on the frontier with founders, we need to be out into the field as far as we possibly can. When we're out there, not a whole lot of people are also out there. They tend to be like-minded people. People who are previously founders or are future founders tend to also want to live in the future and see what is coming next. They often are a little unsettled with the present. I think a part of the reason why founders often start multiple companies is because they just think something can always be better and different. So the founder community supports other founders who want to build better, different, more innovative products. Similarly, it's lonely out there if you don't have early adopters that believe. So we want to surround founders with great early adopters. These are practitioners or customers, people of all levels of seniority in companies big and small. These are the people that want to try early products as early as possible. You might imagine if I put CISOs in a room, there are some CISOs that are terrified that a company has only deployed its product 100 times. But there are some CISOs who are super excited to try that first product. And I want to find those people. Those are the early believers in technical founders. And they're the ones that want to have their fingers in the clay and help to shape what comes next. That's really where the magic is and why we try to build these communities. So that people feel surrounded by like-minded people.
Yeah, I mean, in security, whether it's the buyer, the CISO, just everyone in the community, like we're incredibly risk averse by nature, right? And that includes acquiring and using new products and changing your tech stack and all those kind of things. I wanted to ask you this, like going a little bit deeper on what you just said there, knowing that you're in Silicon Valley, the West Coast, like it's very innovative, forward leaning. Everyone's kind of wants to be the bleeding edge. How do you find that translates, like knowing that you have that community, like where some folks are willing to be early adopters and design partners and things like that? How does that translate when you go to scale? Right now, maybe everyone's not that Silicon Valley native CISO that's, cloud native and AI pilled, et cetera. Like, how do you kind of scale that when you go to scale a startup, across the ecosystem, knowing that not everyone in corporate America kind of thinks like that or builds their security program like that?
It's a great question, Chris. And I think we try to train everybody on this. Like, we want to try to diffuse our ideas into the market as quickly as we can. And we also want to try and find those early believers as often as we can and as quickly as we can. So the cycle time really to creating product market fit is getting these like-minded people together. We are constantly trying to raise our hands and broadcast to the world that if you are interested in seeing innovation at its earliest stage, come to our events, subscribe to our podcasts, show up in some format, and we will get to know you. And similarly, we want our companies at various different levels of maturity. So some companies are, maybe have 3 or 4 years under their belt. May still seem early for a more traditional company, but 3 or 4 years is very different than 3 or 4 quarters. And these companies still seem very innovative to the early majority, while at the same time that might seem a little late to somebody who feels like they're always on the bleeding edge. And so these are our people, Chris, and they in many ways raise their hands to say, we'd like to meet companies at the earliest stage, even though that definition is a little different for everybody.
Yeah, it definitely varies depending on where they are and how mature their organization is and the industry that they work in and so on. And, speaking of podcasts, I tell you, I consume a good bit of your content you put out there. I caught you on Risky Business, and you had made a comment on there, like, I think it was roughly everyone can run the marathon, but it's usually the same few folks who finish first. And it made me wonder, now that AI has kind of lowered the barrier of who can build a product or at least build a prototype, what is actually separating the founders who finish, knowing that everyone can kind of build at this stage and there's a lot of capital and it is a noisy space. Like, what separates everyone from those who actually finish?
To fill in some of the context, maybe for those that didn't have the benefit of listening to that Risky Biz show, I think the point that everyone is trying to assess is, given how diffuse AI is and how powerful it is, on the one hand, it does make it easier to start a company. So that's a really joyful thing to say, that anyone can become a founder. But at the same time, perhaps the double-edged sword is that means everybody can be a founder. And that analogy of either, starting a marathon, but instead of having 10,000 people, having 1 million, is, I think, maybe one way to think about this power of AI. Like, we're all able to do more, and that's fantastic. Everyone can now be a founder. But that means the race is just beginning and you've got 1 million people starting, and what is going to really separate people over the course of the journey. What I also said in that podcast, which I would love to repeat here, because I think it is a good way to distill this for anyone trying to be a founder. AI is really only magical to the extent you have a magic power. So I think when we look at people that are starting companies and using AI and are consistently staying ahead of the pack, it's usually because the AI is really amplifying or accentuating something that is magical or specialized about who they are. So in this particular field, I think there are a lot of really amazing founders that have bespoke knowledge or expertise or methods which can be amplified by AI. Those founders are going to do really well. I think to the extent you're a tourist to cybersecurity and you just want to, you see it as a big market and you want to use AI to come into this market, maybe lacking some of the domain expertise and some of the history, I worry more about those people entering the race, because this is not a straightforward market to attack, and it's got a lot of history. It's got a lot of nuances that are critical. So I think for those of us who've been in the business, AI is really going to help us. For those of us who are just coming in, you got a lot to learn.
Yeah, I actually want to dig a little deeper on that. I'm not, and I may totally misspeak here, but if I'm not mistaken, like say, looking at Palo Alto Networks, like the giant in the industry, the CEO there, I don't think he has a cyber background by trade, if I'm not mistaken. And I have, seen this in my career, sometimes pulling folks from other domains, they kind of look at things differently. They bring new ideas because we tend to, again, be very risk averse and kind of stuck in our ways sometimes in security. Have you seen the opposite, where someone comes from a different discipline or a different domain, but they bring a fresh set of eyes or a new way of doing something or a new way of looking at problems or perspectives, et cetera, that, coupled with maybe a partner or co-founder, right, that has this domain expertise, it can actually be a force multiplier.
100%. And maybe just to start with Nikesh Arora, the CEO of Palo Alto Networks, an amazing leader, one of the most talented executives in Silicon Valley, who has helped to create an incredibly valuable company. I think one of the things he's done well is he's acquired domain experts in all of the most important emerging fields. And so if I was to give him a lot of credit, it's when he sees an emerging domain, he will usually find an elite level startup and buy that company well in advance of everybody else thinking it's an obvious idea. And the team of people that he's assembled inside of Palo Alto Networks augments his natural skills and the superpowers that a large company can have. And so I think that recipe comes well together. To specifically address the startup point, yes, I do think in some ways we all have to take a small version of that playbook and figure out where is the domain expertise going to be best expressed, where are sort of personal leadership or entrepreneurial talents going to come together in a team. And it is unquestionably better to have multidisciplinary capabilities on your team, as opposed to just feeling like you can stay comfortable doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, well said. I just was curious how you thought about that. And again, to what you said about Nikesh, it's a testament to, I won't say surround yourself with people smarter than you, but, people who know things you don't know and have areas of expertise that you don't have and so on. Like it's, that's such a critical thing to do in your career and in your life. I wanted to ask you this. Decibel recently led the 100 million seed round, I believe, in Ent, which is founded by a team, behind RiskIQ and Microsoft Security Copilot, with a bet on prevention over detection. If you could walk me through what you saw that justified like a seed round of that size and why that team. Actually, I've chatted with some of the folks on the team. They're incredibly sharp, but I'm curious from your perspective too.
Yeah, I think embedded in this question is, does every company need to raise $100 million out of the gates? Or why, for example, in the past have we said $5 or $10 million is the appropriate amount of money, and now maybe you're seeing people raise $50 or $100 million? To dive into the nuance of Ent specifically, because I think it is a great example of the game that is being played on the field. For those that are not familiar with Ent, it is an amazing team that had previously built a startup which was acquired by Microsoft and became the team behind Microsoft Security Copilot. Ent specifically is trying to reimagine how we do endpoint security using small AI models that are very similar to how computer vision works in autonomous driving. So said a different way, it's the self-driving moment for the endpoint. Endpoint is obviously a very big market with incredibly formidable players, people that I respect quite a bit, and I've obviously grown up in this business, having been acquired by Symantec in the mid-2000s. So I don't take on endpoint without having a lot of intentionality. I certainly would not expect a customer to take on a a startup's product if they did not feel like we were in it to win it and we were going to be around for a long time. I certainly think the size of the investment is really commensurate with the commitment that we all need to make together to build a company that would be enduring, to really make a dent in this space. So it is, I think, in many ways, one of the biggest bets you can make in cybersecurity. Sometimes I call endpoint the Super Bowl of cyber. And that's why I think it's appropriate to start out of the gates with the right amount of resourcing and the right amount of commitment, not just from us, but from the entire investor group and also the management team that has come together to try to take on this hill.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think to your point, it is like the Super Bowl of cyber. It's such a critical category. And there's some companies that have a long tenure and expertise and understand the domain very well. So you're going to have to, again, go big, right, to try to compete in that space. I was going to ask you too, I know you probably see tons and tons of pitch decks, and we know nearly every pitch deck right now is claiming to be AI native. When you're evaluating a company, how do you tell if it's genuinely AI native versus a product that's just kind of bolting on a Copilot or kind of AI painting, I guess you'd say? There's different AI washing and so on, like these phrases that we use.
I'm so glad you're bringing this up. If I just had one ask for everybody out there that is trying to pitch VCs or even design a new startup in today's world, cyber or not, I don't necessarily think throwing AI into everything or trying to be as AI pilled as you reference is really helping everybody. You might imagine that one of the things that AI does is it makes a lot of things easy, and it also generalizes intelligence. So just to maybe oversimplify, if you have something that is super special and super unique, AI tends to dull or pivot your idea towards something that's more generalized, and that's because it's a product that is built to generalize intelligence. And so in the old days, Chris, I think a lot of people would say that the reason why, in particular in cybersecurity, people were successful is we had irreverent people that didn't like to follow rules, built bespoke expertise that no one really understood, and then we were able to codify that expertise and bring it to the world in a way that took what might have been viewed as offensive and turned it into something that was powerful and defensive. I still think that's the recipe for today. AI can help you tell that story, but I just hope everyone remembers that, like, please be irreverent and try to do what you can to get outside the guardrails of what generalized intelligence provides, because I definitely think that's like the secret sauce that we all need to invest in.
Yeah, so speaking of AI, and I'm sure this is part of what's driving this, like I follow folks like Peter Walker from Carta, who shares some great visualizations and breakdowns on where the capital is going. And I think you touched on this on the Risky Biz, as well as some of the writing and posts you've made. Like, you've tracked the VC dry powder for years, and I think you have a recent piece that argues AI is eating venture capital. If foundation models and AI infrastructure keep absorbing most of the dollars, what does that concentration mean for cyber founders trying to raise in 2026? Again, like even maybe going back to the prior comment about trying to AI everything, I'm sure that's driving some of this behavior too.
The good news, Chris, is in cyber specifically, AI has been the greatest gift in a long time. So you are accurate in saying that the vast majority of the new capital that has gone into this business is going to some form of AI infrastructure or foundation model lab. Like that part of the industry has consumed a ton of capital. But at the same time, it's clear, perhaps to everybody that listens to your show, that one of the killer apps of AI is hacking. And so the Mythos moment, I think, took what might have seemed like a really niche-y industry and has put us on the global stage. So the market for cybersecurity products almost overnight has gone up dramatically. I don't think that that's well captured in the numbers. And I think the amount of investment that is going into cybersecurity is also going up dramatically, and that's also not captured in the numbers. So I think my good news to everybody is our best years are now and ahead of us. And it is often that these numbers are reported in arrears.
Yeah, I've definitely written about this a lot, where the markets, like Kelly Shortridge has a great piece. Markets don't give a what about cyber, and there's a lot of proof that share prices rebound pretty quickly after incidents and all that. And like, we've kind of been wandering through the wilderness of like trying to get everyone's attention to take security seriously. And I feel like AI is kind of like finally like finally people are paying attention and like finally taking these things seriously. So I think it is ultimately going to be a gift in that regard. And as you said, there's a lot of opportunity there, both for investors and founders, and to address a lot of the long-standing security technical debt that's been in this space. I was actually curious. This isn't necessarily a security thing. It could be, but there's been a lot of discussion lately about, we talked about the amount of capital disproportionately going towards models and frontier labs and things like that, infrastructure. What do you make of the recent conversation right now around open source and it catching up to the frontier and the implications of that in general, but also for security? Like there's security considerations of using a frontier model versus self-hosting and all the kind of security considerations therein. Like, what do you make of this entire conversation that's kind of going on right now?
Well, I'm a huge fan of your work, and obviously I saw what Josh had to say yesterday. In general, just for maybe the readers that haven't had a chance to see all of that, probably the biggest part of this debate that I agree with is in general, the cat is already out of the bag. So to the extent that anyone thinks that we can put it back in the bag, I don't think that that's going to be possible. The capabilities of frontier labs and open model providers are far enough along that there's really no turning back. So in my personal view, I think the more that we can diffuse this technology in everyone's hands, the more likelihood we're going to be able to build the right countermeasures and defenses as an industry to keep up with the advancement. I think sunlight has always been the best disinfectant in our industry. I know many of us have been working on that for decades, trying to take what might have been happening in the dark and bring it into the light. I think when we do that as an internet, we become more resilient. I think when we do that as an industry, we build better solutions. So I personally feel like we need to keep these products in the hands of as many people as possible, because there's just no way we're going to be able to restrict it.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And it is funny because there's a lot of conversation right now about banning X models, maybe from certain nations or certain types of models. And like, that's just not how any of this works. Anyone who's working in enterprise IT knows, like, when you try to ban or block something, like, users find a way. And you can't, especially with open source, like, it's going to be pervasive, it's going to be forked, it's going to be duplicated, distributed. Like, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle.
Well,
yeah.
And if I could just make one more point, I think many of us have known for the longest time that there's enough talented people to be able to attack or hack pretty much anything that we put out into the world. When we think about foundation models, I think a lot of the genius of why hackers can be successful is because now they can just throw their own insights with compute in order to attack surfaces. I think it is super important that all of us wake up to that reality and therefore begin to build countermeasures, which are going to require these same products to be working autonomously on our behalf. Many people I know are already working on that. It's been many years of founders collaborating with foundation model labs to get these products into market. I think those are going to be great solutions, and I certainly am optimistic that we'll get this ecosystem balanced the way that it is today.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm excited to see what comes of it. And I think that, again, like, there's a lot of opportunity to use AI for good within security, to address all kinds of systemic issues we have over the years within cybersecurity. I wanted to ask you about this category in particular. Like, I know Decibel was early into Dropzone AI, which put autonomous agents to work investigating alerts in the SOC. This is a space that's seen so many different startups, so much capital. A lot of vendors are claiming agents can replace tier one analysts, things like that. From where you sit across the portfolio, what part of the agentic SOC story do you think is real versus maybe is oversold? And not particularly to any vendor, but it's just that particular category has gotten so much attention from founders, from capital, that kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe just to replay the history, I think the first ChatGPT moment was in the end of 2022, and Dropzone, Edward Wu, started creating the first autonomous SOC product in the first quarter of 2023. So at least from our standpoint, it's been well over 3 years of building solutions to try to automate and augment what people are doing inside the SOC. I think the narrative on this space is that it's been very crowded. I think what is the truth is a lot of people have been experimenting largely with Cloud Code to try to figure out how to automate and augment what they do at work every day. I think the Unprompted conference is a great example showcasing all that is possible. So I definitely think the SOC is being automated with AI. And I definitely think people are getting a lot of power out of using AI every day, even if they're just using Cloud Code credits in order to do that. Dropzone has taken the next leap, which is to try to make some of this work self-driving and fully autonomous, because at some point, some of the work really should be done without a security engineer maybe doing as much of the human in the loop work that is currently required with Cloud Code. In that domain, I think the breakthrough that you saw in foundation models starting at the end of last year and going into this year, which has effectively led to the explosive growth of companies like Anthropic and OpenAI, they've been the huge beneficiary of that. So today, I think there's only a small handful of companies that can really do autonomous end-to-end work, and they are one of them.
Yeah, it's definitely a crowded space, but it has that's because there's so much opportunity, so much potential. We know there's so much tedium, cumbersome activities that are manual and ineffective, and too much data, not enough human labor, et cetera.
The analogy, Chris, I often use is I think a lot of people know what it means to have driver assistance in their car, and I think Cloud Code is really a great driver assistant in the SOC. The self-driving car is quite different, and for example, with Dropzone, you do need to drive a lot of miles in order to be able to go to a customer and to say, given your particular use case, we've driven enough miles in the industry in order to come to you and say, this is ready for prime time. So after 3+ years and now very big advancements in foundation models, I think we are at that self-driving moment in the SOC, which is why I think you're going to see a lot of change.
Yeah, that's a good point in terms of being early, right? They've gained so much experience and insight into trying to apply this technology to that domain that they can bring the expertise, that experience to customers. And I have seen some great research from Dropzone in collaboration with like Cloud Security Alliance and others who give some real world insight into the adoption and the nuances that you don't often hear, among the marketing hype. So definitely check that out, check them out. I often write a lot about in the cybersecurity market on my Resilient Cyber outlet, and there's a flood of AI security startups hitting the vendor landscape. Some buyers, of course, feel exhausted and overwhelmed. And actually had Ed Sim on the show last week, and he said I don't want to misquote him, but he said there's too many damn companies. Basically, like so a lot of these companies aren't going to make it. Is kind of what he was saying. From the investor side, how do you think about how many of these companies may actually persist and sustain and thrive versus some that obviously will not? Like we know venture capital is a power law, ecosystem.
Chris, just because you and I have grown up in this business, and I know Ed has too, this ebbs and flows. There's always periods of time when people say there's too many startups and there should be a wave of consolidation. Generally speaking, the consolidation comes, and then there's a moment where people feel like there aren't enough startups, and we birth even more. So may I be one of the first, but certainly not the last, to say that this is a cycle, and we're probably in the part of the cycle where there's been mass proliferation of cybersecurity companies, and that means there's probably going to be a lot more consolidation coming. That certainly shouldn't dissuade people from starting unique companies, though. So I think sometimes we forget that starting a company is an N of one business. So if you are a special person with a special idea and now is your moment, you may stare at 3,000 companies that look like they're doing something similar, but if they really aren't doing something similar, you are N of one. So I don't want the macro picture to dissuade people from getting on the field. And I often remind people that, we're all so small in the beginning relative to the macro picture. So, if you've got a great idea and you want to start a company and you think now is your moment, there's no better time than now.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's a very, very unique time in industry. And it's cyclical. Like it always expands, contracts. There's never going to be kind of one ring to rule them all. As much as a big vendor would love to make the platform push and consolidation, like the category doesn't work like that. There's too many specialized areas of expertise and domains, and it's just a complicated space. And I don't think it'll ever function like with, say just Pepsi and Coca-Cola. Like it's never going to be like that. I was going to ask you this too. We talked about this a little bit in the beginning of, what founders get from working with a firm like yours, and talked about security buyers. And there's plenty of CISOs in the audience who buy from early stage startups, and I want to expand this to also not just CISOs, but maybe people joining a startup too, like on the practitioner side. When they're evaluating a young vendor or a young startup, what should they look at in the company's funding and investor base to judge, whether this company will still be around in a couple of years, both from a buyer, but also from the talent side of joining a startup?
I think every buyer today looks at the dimensions that perhaps are obvious. Is it a great team? Do they have a lot of money? do the investors have some history building these kinds of companies? Maybe that's table stakes. So perhaps more nuance to that answer might be, how unique is this product? And is this product likely going to have some longevity, because I can see this product expanding and doing things that others can't do because they're trying to tackle a problem in a unique way, or they have perhaps a unique data set or some unique intellectual property or some unique people that are just not easily replicated. That tends to be how I look at the world, and maybe how other sophisticated buyers look at the world. Is, I'm going to partner with this company because I'm going to get something a little different than if I partner with everybody else. In general, I would say customers would rather partner with an existing vendor if they feel like it's an obvious roadmap addition. But if it's not an obvious roadmap addition, and there's unique expertise, and you really need to be best of breed because the space is changing so quickly, then customers would prefer to work with best of breed vendors. And that has been true since the beginning of my career in this space. And I think it will always be true that the whole point of being the startup is to bring some uniqueness to the customer environment that they won't get somewhere else.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about being unique rather than just trying to be like everyone else. That'll make you a more formidable partner, more trusted partner, right? And bring that longevity level of assurance, right, to the buyer and to practitioners joining your team, you know?
At seed stage, I always tell founders, customers are not buying your product. They're buying a partnership. And so they want to work with you to help shape the environment and protect themselves in a way that no other vendor is going to do for them, which is why at this stage they're choosing to work with you. And to the extent people who are starting companies today focus on that uniqueness, it's a lot easier sometimes to find customers to lean into you because they understand that they're getting something different.
Well said, well said. So last, kind of official question for you. We talked about Ent and the launch of that. We talked about the rise of AI attacks, kind of compressing, the time from attack to compromise and impact, et cetera, from days to seconds. Like, looking out over the next 2 to 3 years, and I know this is hard to give a singular answer because it's probably in many areas, many directions, but where do you see Decibel placing its next bets in security? Are there certain categories or functions or certain areas of security that really have your attention?
I think on the technical side, Ent is a great example of a company that is using novel technology to reimagine how we do cybersecurity today. So I definitely think that's a field. If you think about this being a self-driving or autonomous change, there's a lot of underlying pieces that need to be built. And so I tend to coach founders that it's great to look at these categories, but to look at what is novel that we didn't have before. And there are thousands of AI models and lots of new data sources. And those kinds of solutions, I think, are really interesting and will continue to be interesting to us. I think from a business perspective, probably the biggest change I hope comes to this industry, Chris, is instead of this feeling only like a threat detection and response business where we're constantly looking at data and firing off alerts, I think one of the great opportunities is to bring business context into cybersecurity and to think about what we do as creating resiliency inside of a company, so that ransomware really isn't just paying a fine, but it's actually keeping the bank and the lights on, and that there's a lot of economics at stake. And in the future, I think there's so much at stake that people will spend a lot more money on cybersecurity because there's really economic despair that comes from not keeping your infrastructure humming all day long. So I think cyber insurance could be a much bigger business. I certainly think resiliency in and of itself is a much bigger business than just that detection and response alone.
Yeah, I love it. And, of course, being on the Resilient Cyber Show, you won't hear me argue against that case. I agree with you completely. I lied about the last question. I know you all have some events coming up at Black Hat, like a game day event, a happy hour and so on. Tell folks about that before we jump off.
Yeah, I'm super excited that we're partnering with you on this event. So on Tuesday at Black Hat, we are known for a Founders Helping Founders event, which we've now expanded to be an entire day. And that day is called Game Day. It's really modeled after the college game days that you see on TV. We're going to have a giant stage. We'll be bringing lots of founders. We'll be bringing lots of early adopters. And we hope if you're in town, you'll come. And maybe if we have a chance at the end, we'll share a registration link.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely we'll do that with folks who are tuning in. And I appreciate you jumping on. I'm looking forward to hang out in person soon. And again, if you're not following Jon, please do. He drops some great insights about the intersection of venture capital with software technology and, of course, cybersecurity. So, Jon, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks so much, Chris. I had a lot of fun.
Awesome. Take care.